Hello, my name is Tammy Vincent, and I'm here along with Abby Thomas and Roseanne Green to introduce to you a response to intervention PowerPoint that we created as a professional development activity. This is an extension of our Chapter 3 in our book, Educational Testing and Measurement, and we just want to break down some of the high points about RTI and how to incorporate that into your classroom. We're going to start our professional development with an icebreaker. This is just a way to get all of our attendees to be comfortable with each other and with sharing. And so the icebreaker that we chose was called They Said What? This is just going back into your week and coming up with an idea that you heard one of your students say, something silly, something off the wall, just something that you can share with your partner to break the ice, as it's called, an icebreaker, and to start laughing, having fun, and really realizing what it is we do every day when we work with students, and realizing how important it is to make sure that we make them feel comfortable in class as well. So then we're going from the icebreaker into our group 1 activity, and this is a video that was produced by Pearson, and it's just a basic introductory video to response to intervention. It goes over the 3-tier system that is laid out in the response to intervention program, and it explains each of those tiers. And so we will show, it's about a 2.5-minute video that we would show to our participants, and we're going to go into that even deeper into a question and answer discussion type session as we move along through our PowerPoint.
So next in the presentation, as a follow-up to the video that participants just watched, we'll have a discussion about what is RTI, and essentially just clarifying for those participants that it is a process and a strategy just to help students who are struggling in a skill or lesson, and that those interventions that are used to help a student with a learning need can be in the form of differentiations, and that they're used by every teacher in every class to help students have the best chance of success. And just a clarification as well that RTI is not just for students with special needs or learning disabilities, that it's for the entire student population. So more on the population, when you look at Tier 1, that's your core classroom instruction. That's what should be happening in every classroom. And so Tier 1 is usually where 80% of students will remain in Tier 1 category. And then as we move to Tier 2, that is targeted small group instruction. So that is after students have been identified in Tier 1 as needing additional support, that will come in Tier 2, and that is traditionally where 15% of students would find themselves using the RTI model. And then Tier 3 is reserved for students who might have a particular learning need that needs to be addressed through an IEP. And so 5% of students would find themselves in Tier 3. So all students will experience all levels of, or could experience all levels of instruction in the RTI model. But again, most students would stay in that Tier 1 instruction, which is targeted toward their learning needs still and differentiated with interventions provided so that they can remain in Tier 1. So more about this when we're thinking about Tier 1. So as you're generally instructing students in the classroom, you would see students who might be at risk after you screen them, and they have summative assessments where they might have been identified at risk, or previous performance where they have been identified. And then we provide whole group instruction in that general education setting, and we're using best practices in teaching. We're differentiating instruction in Tier 1. We've identified learning styles of students and particular learning needs there, and just catering to them in those lessons. And then, of course, we're continually monitoring students through formative and summative assessments. So those formative assessments that are informal in class give a teacher a lot of information about where their performance needs to go as far as success for students.
So after working with all of the students, whole group in Tier 1, we pull out the students that need a little bit more of an intensive approach with our Tier 2 kids. And so inside the Tier 2, we're identifying specific strengths and weaknesses and doing further progress monitoring. We are measuring the response to previous instruction and interventions and seeing if we need to go further. We are then administering curriculum-based assessments that are going to pinpoint specific areas of difficulty around the students that are continuing to struggle after they've completed the whole group activities. And then based on the results that we're getting, we're tailoring either group or individual interventions that get progressively harder and more challenging. And then just like we did in Tier 1, we're also going to continue to monitor that progress so that our students will either go back up to Tier 1 or they'll travel on down the path to Tier 3 with more intensive instruction. So when we get to Tier 3, we're doing some diagnostic testing and your really intensive progressive monitoring. We're still measuring the responses constantly, checking those assessments and determining where our kids are going, if they are progressing the way that we need them to, or if we need to pull in more intensive instructions for those kids. This is also the place where we start to diagnose those specific learning disabilities, and we start to develop those IEPs for the students. So a lot of the students that you're going to find in your Tier 3 are also your students that go to the resource teacher or are pulled out for different interventions throughout the day.
So after we discuss the 3 tiers that are involved in this RTI system, we're going to actually have a group activity where we break down the data. We're going to give the participants a classroom set of data. We're going to look at this data and we're going to discuss how to identify those strengths and weaknesses that students have so that we know how to place them in the different groups. Now, just as Catherine said earlier, we're going to make sure that all students are starting out on Tier 1 level with that instruction that is needed to meet the standards, but also we need to make sure that we're meeting all of their learning styles. After we do the initial instruction, that's when we begin to pull them and rank them in the Tier 2 and Tier 3. So looking at the data is crucial to this RTI system. You can't just make a decision based on subjectivity. You need the data to be objective. You need the data to prove that these students are truly in need of the services that you have to offer and not just lacking in instruction from the teacher.
So as far as benefits of RTI goes, just as Tammy mentioned, those decisions are being made based on data. And so cumulative data from formative assessments, progress monitoring, summative assessments are guiding those decisions throughout this model. Another benefit is we are identifying students with learning disabilities very early, and we can offer interventions to those students much earlier once they have been identified, and they're receiving those interventions in Tier 1. So their chances of success, even if they were a little bit behind in reading or math, are going to improve because they're getting interventions in Tier 1. It also sets an ambitious pace for those struggling students. So we have a pacing that allows them to meet goals and then change the interventions if they don't meet a goal. So we can offer different levels of interventions. Once we see that something doesn't work, we can try another intervention. And throughout this model, we're providing time for collaboration among administrators, teachers, parents, the students themselves, so that they understand why we are working in this way to improve their learning. It also gives everyone a sense of shared responsibility and increased accountability for that student's success. And so again, typically it will have a benefit of reducing behavior problems as well, because a lot of those behavior problems are driven by the fact that the student is struggling to learn.
Whoop. All right, so after completing the professional development with the teachers that we have in attendance, we would give them this rubric to kind of I guess, go over and grade us as how we presented the material. So we would have them give us either 0 to 5 points in 4 different areas. Representation of all group members, making sure that all the group members were present and took a active role in the presentation. Clear and concise presentation. The material was presented clearly and concisely and covered the majority of the learning outcomes. Looking at the grammar and mechanics, making sure that we were free of grammatical errors, and that the presentation was well organized and clearly designed as well. And then at the end of our presentation, we have our resources, which we pulled from to gather all this material. Thank you.